Hi everyone, welcome to episode 2. In the previous video, we created a little counter app using React, but it wasn't very React-like because it consisted only of a single component. In here, the component is called app. So components in React are JavaScript functions. So we have an app component that renders a div containing a header, 3 buttons, and room for the count. What I want to do here is we actually make separate components for these things. So rather than putting an H1 of the counter, we can go ahead and create a new component. And I'll do so right here. Maybe it's a heading. And let's just make this actually return H1 counter. And what we're going to get from this is after I remove this counter here, you can see it goes away. But now I'm going to write in here header post tag as an element right here. Not defined, heading. Okay, there we go. And now it looks just like it did before. And to have space for the counter, we can call this a counter display function counter display. And this thing can just say return H2. And in here, we'll set the value, which is count. So we're just abstracting things away just a little bit. I'll remove this, and we're going to replace it with counter display. Okay, we haven't really done very much here. Let's make sure it still works, except that we're starting to use a component-oriented architecture rather than just using HTML elements. One of the nice things about React is we can parameterize, so to speak, these components by adding what are called props. So rather than say hard coding in here in the heading, the name counter, we can actually pass in what's known as a property. So let's say that we called this parameter title. So pass in an object of properties containing a property with the name title. And we can get title to render just like we saw this before. I put in curly braces. Now, how do we get title passed to the component? We use the syntax that's probably familiar to you from HTML or XML if you know it. So we can actually write the string counter like so. So counter. Okay. And there we go. And now it looks good. Okay, and then for the counter display, we could do a similar sort of thing. Maybe we can say value equals, and we know the value is going to be the count. And then we can say here, the value is whatever the value is. And now we pass the count in directly, and things still work. Okay, again, we didn't really do a lot of great stuff here, but we're showing that we can make things look a little bit nicer. As far as these buttons go, we can do a similar sort of a thing. So let's make a button component, and we'll go with function button. And I'm just realizing that there's no reason for this counter display to be here now that we parameterized it. So this can go out here. And what should we do for our buttons? Well, buttons seem to have, there's an on click and then there's a name. So let's do the following. Let's put in 2 parameters. We'll put in, rather than saying on click, let's just call this the action we want to show. And then we'll also pass in a label. So when we return a button whose on click is, and then we're going into JavaScript. So we use curly braces, and then the label for the button will go inside of here. I think this is good. And then what we can do now is these will be replaced with a capital B. React components are functions being with a capital letter. So let's make sure that we go with capital B button. Capital B button. And let's do the same thing here and here. Right? And now we're not going to be using on click. Instead of on click, we're going to be using action. So let's go with action. And then for our labels, we have, I'm just going to go with up for a second. And we'll label this one here down. We're going to label this one reset. And let's see if things work now. Up, 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 down, down, down. Okay, reset. Okay, so now our app component right now looks a little more React-ish, right? There's a div over here, but then there's a heading component followed by 3 button components and a counter display. And then our actions right here are stored here, and these components here outside. It's usually nice, sometimes it's nice to have our components be in separate files. So let's take a quick look at how to do that. We can create files for the heading. So we can do heading.js. And inside of heading.js, we can move in our code right here. And let's put heading in here as a function. But since our heading component is now in a separate file, in order to use it in our app component, we should export it from heading.js. Let's export it as a default because it's the only thing we're exporting from this file over here. And it's kind of nice in JavaScript if you're only exporting one thing to export it as a default, which we'll do here. And then in app, if we want to bring it in, it's important that we actually import heading from. Now, heading is a file in our app, so we have to bring it in as a file. The / here means current directory. Find heading.js here, whereas React right here is not started with /. So this is a library that's been brought in. You can see it in package.json. React was brought in a dependency. So that's where we're fetching it from. Okay, and we can really quickly do the same for the counter display and the button. We can create button.js. We can create also maybe we should just call it display.js or a number display or something, or maybe a simple display.js to make it look a little bit more how do we say, a little bit more reusable, right? Rather than saying it's a counter, it's just a simple display. So what should our button look like? Let's go into app and let's grab our button component from here. We'll drop it in here. Let's export it as a default. Yeah, I mean, we can just check right here. This is a very generic button, right? The component here is very generic. We don't even know that it's being used in our counter app. It's just something with a label and an action. So we just pass in whatever action we want the button to do. Or on click, we pass in whatever label we want to show. So it turns out to be pretty nice. And then let's do the same thing for what we call counter display. For counter display, we'll rename it to simple display, which looks a bit better. And all simple display does is display something as a heading too. And we'll just deal with that. So let's import button from ./button. And let's import simple display from /simple display. And we're going to rename simple counter display here to simple display. And we're almost there. What's wrong over here? Check the render method app. What did we do wrong here? We have a simple display, we have a heading, we have a button. We brought in a heading, we brought in a button, we brought in a simple display. What looks wrong here? Simple display is not exported. Export default. Function simple display. And now we are back in business. And now if we take a look at the overall architecture of our app, we see our app is a nice single component with a single state variable. It has a few operations inside of it, but the app component itself is nice and clean. You can see it's just referring to other components, and those other components are imported from files with exactly the same name. And this is a little bit more scalable. As you have dozens and dozens more components, you'll be breaking them out into their own files and probably actually making subfolders within SRC is something else you can try. Okay, hope you found that one useful. We're going to be using that same style in all of our future episodes.